It was devastating to see the attack on October 7th and the hostages, and I'm glad that those hostages have started to be released. I had met with the family of some of the hostages, and it is a relief to see Abigail, the 4-year-old girl, and so many others being released, and we need to work to make sure all the hostages are released. It also has been just heart-wrenching and devastating to see the loss of Palestinian lives. Over 50% children, many young kids in the rubbles and being pulled out from the rubbles. Over 12,000 killed, most civilians, and hit at hospitals, at churches, at mosques, at schools. And then the humanitarian crisis, I convened with UNRWA's head, the Secretary General, and he told me about the lack of fuel, the lack of water that was there. And that is why I called a few days ago for a permanent ceasefire. I just do not think we can continue this cycle of violence. We need to make sure that all the hostages are released as they are being released. We need to make sure that there is now a peace process with a two-state solution. We need to make sure that it's a mutual ceasefire, obviously. So if there were ever an attack again on Israel, rockets launched, the ceasefire would be broken, but we need to have a mutual ceasefire, and we need to make a two-state solution with Palestinians at the table and an independent Palestinian state living side by side with an Israeli state. And I am working with my colleagues to make sure that that view is conveyed to the administration, to the senior people making the decision. Ultimately, it's for the administration to do. I know there was a sense of Congress resolution that some had. I didn't get onto that one because that didn't call for the release of all the hostages, and I wanted to speak in my own voice. But there are now about 43 of us and Senator Welch and others who have called for a permanent ceasefire, and we'll be taking action to make sure our voice is conveyed to the administration and appropriate action to make sure that that happens and we can bring peace in the region. So that is the update on the Israel-Palestine situation and the Middle East. It's just been awful to see first the violence on October 7th and the 1,200 killed and the hostages, and then the horrific scenes of Palestinian children, Palestinian families killed, some family members from people in our district who were killed, who lost family. And I grieve for every lost soul, and I understand how many people in our district are hurting and grieving. And so I will continue to try to be a voice for peace, for rebuilding in the region, for any aid, also including aid to UNRWA and to Gaza's redevelopment, and for a two-state solution with the Israeli state secure and an independent Palestinian state. So let me now go to questions this week, where we're voting also on expelling George Santos. Let's see if he resigns. We're voting on some of the budget provisions to try to get funding for our government more funded. I mean, right now we just have a continuing resolution. Sorry for the brief pause. I'm trying to read the comments as I go by to make sure I've answered a lot of the questions. But we're voting the Republicans are voting for cuts on education. Today they came up with a commission to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, and they want to cut. Every day they're voting on $1 for the NIH director. Basically, they don't want cancer research. They don't want Alzheimer's research. They don't want student aid. They don't want Pell Grants. It's a very extreme vision, and we have to make sure that we're standing up for working families, for middle-class families, and contrasting with what the Republicans want to do. I am not for those cuts. We've got to be supporting our families. And in the Bay Area, affordable housing is a huge issue. Rents are up, mortgages are up. It was already hard to buy a house, very, very hard to buy a house. People are having an issue with rent, and I'm working to build more affordable housing, social housing, to figure out how we make sure rent isn't going up higher than inflation, and dealing with the housing crisis in our district, and to prevent private equity from buying up single family homes and rental units here. So let me now go to the comments. I think I've answered most of the questions. Someone had asked about the perpetrators. Of course, the perpetrators of October 7th should be held accountable and must be held accountable, indicted, held accountable in international court, and held accountable in terms of the horrific crimes they've committed. And so, of course, I'm for holding the perpetrators of October 7th accountable. I'm seeing a lot of the comments, some of the comments which I know personally, of people who've lost family in Gaza. And of course, there was someone very prominent in our district, and a mom who's lost 8 family members. And I've heard so many stories. I've heard Israeli stories of people who know folks in Israel who've had hostages, who know some of the hostages, or lost lives on October 7th. And I've heard devastating stories of people in Gaza who have lost total families. One person I saw on Twitter, and who I know, a prominent technologist, who lost 36 people in his family in Gaza. I mean, it's just been unfathomable, the human loss. And that is why, again, I've called for a permanent ceasefire, one of 43 members of Congress to do so. And now I think we have 3 senators, or 2 senators, Senator Merkley, Senator Welsh. But there's a growing understanding that we need a ceasefire. Let's get to the question. So the next question is, child poverty in America was cut by half by the child tax credit. Any chance the Congress can bring it back? Excellent question. The reality is, now we know. This is no longer theoretical. When we did the child tax credit, we put $300 in the pockets of every family with a kid. If they had 2 kids, $600, and child poverty was cut by half. We know the program works. And then Republicans refused to extend it. Senator Manchin didn't want to extend it, so we couldn't get it done through reconciliation. If we need to bring it back, and if not, it's very clear that poverty in America is a choice, is a policy choice. Thank you for vocalizing support. So just to finish the answer on that, I'm committed to it. The House Democrats are committed to it. We need to have a majority in the Senate to do it. The Republicans, unfortunately, are not for extending the child tax credit. It's a big debate. Do we want tax cuts for the very wealthy, or do we want to give tax credits to people who need it to lower poverty? And I'm very fortunate. I'm elected from a district that allows me to vote for the vulnerable, for the children, for the working class folks, for the people in need, even though we're one of the wealthiest districts. So thank you for allowing me to stand up for the child tax credit. I'll continue to fight for it. Thank you for vocalizing support for a ceasefire, permanent ceasefire. I just want to be clear on that. When can we expect you to sign on to HR 786? If you're not planning HR 786, what legislation are you writing to achieve a permanent ceasefire? A couple points on HR 786. First, it's not a binding resolution. It's a sense of Congress. So that just means it's what some people in Congress think. It doesn't have any legislative teeth. There are 13 people on it. There are 43 have called for a permanent ceasefire. Those of us who haven't signed it largely want to speak in our own voice. And the reason I didn't get on it is they didn't call for the release of all hostages. And I have said that there has to be a permanent ceasefire, but a release of all hostages. And I have given my statement. I went on this week, ABC News, if people haven't had a chance. I think I'm one of the first members of Congress to go on a Sunday talk show to talk about that. I followed Jake Sullivan. I'm supposed to speak to Jake, the National Security Advisor, this week, speak to the Secretary of State. So I'm making my voice very, very clear. We need other members to make it clear to the administration. And ultimately, the call of a ceasefire and calling for that is for the president and the State Department to do. Congress, we're never going to get the votes. The Republicans wouldn't put it up for a vote. So the key here is advocacy with the administration. The single largest threat to this country needs your attention. What are you doing, and what can we do to prevent a return of Trump to the presidency? I share that deep concern. Look, this is not a political town hall, so I can't talk about the politics of what I'm doing on the political side, though we can discuss that some other time. But what I can talk about is the threat that he would be. I mean, he is talking, if he comes into the presidency, of eliminating a lot of the federal civil service, the people we rely on, to make sure that the medicine when you go to Walgreens or CVS is safe, the FDA, to make sure our air is clean, to make sure our water is clean, to make sure that when you go to the airport, you know that the plane is going to be safe, to make sure that we have mail that can be delivered, to make sure that our troops are protected, to make sure that we're doing research on cancer, on vaccines, all of those important civil servants, he's threatening to fire. He's threatening to take revenge on people who were opposed him. He's threatening not to follow parts of the Constitution. This is a real threat to everything we know in America. And I just hope people can be very clear-eyed about what he represents. He's not hiding the ball. He's telling us exactly what he plans to do. Updating our immigration system through the EAGLE Act is about upholding American values and securing the country's economic future. I respectfully urge you to work with your counterparts to support the EAGLE Act of 2023. Absolutely. I've been a co-sponsor. I've been a leader on this with Roger Krishnamurthy and Zoe Lofgren. We need the EAGLE Act. We need people who have been in this country for 10, 15, 20 years to be able to get a green card. And I appreciate that. I see a comment from Margaret Okuzumi, who I know for many years. And I just want to highlight that the food insecurity in this area, which is very sharp. I was just at Second Harvest Food Bank over Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving weekend, volunteering. They do enormous work, and they are feeding a lot of people in Santa Clara and San Mateo right now. As Margaret points out, it's 1 in 6 people. I saw Reid Hoffman is now doing a lot for Second Harvest. I was so encouraged to see hundreds of volunteers when I was volunteering there this past week with some people in my team. Whatever we can do individually to help people with food insecurity. And of course, at the federal level, this is why we need SNAP benefits. This is why we need housing assistance benefits. This is why we need community grants. These are all the things that we're fighting for as Democrats, and the Republicans want to cut. But we do need to pay attention to this food insecurity in our district. I mean, a Thanksgiving turkey, 10 pounds cost $35. I mean, that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And it is still, the cost of living is still high for too many people. You seem to be supportive of Medicare reform. What is your position on repealing the law that prevents Medicare Part D from taking advantage of pharmacy discounts and coupons? Well, if this is going after the PBMs that I thought are the problem, then I am for that. And I am for making sure Medicare can negotiate directly on these drugs, that we cap the price of insulin, not just for people on Medicare, but for everyone at $35. But we look at capping other drugs and the cost of them, and not beyond what the generics are. And we look to have Medicare negotiate for those prices. Saeed Kadrias, thank you so much, Ro, for recognizing the need for a lasting ceasefire ASAP. Lasting or permanent, I've used both words, but bottom line is I want a ceasefire that is indefinite, that lasts, so that we can begin the substantial levels of rebuilding. What would you be willing to lead legislation towards that end? We have 43 members of Congress who have been for this. Most of the members, like Jamie Raskin and Sarah Jacobs and others, want to speak in their own voice. They have their own nuance. So it's not going to be effective to get someone on legislation, especially when that legislation is not going anywhere, because Republican House, Republican committees aren't going to take that legislation up. So what is the most effective thing we can do is to speak on the media, to speak collectively, to speak with the Progressive Caucus. I'm working on getting the Progressive Caucus to take that position. We need more members coming out for it. And then ultimately, it's the State Department. We need the State Department. We need the president to say that this is enough. We've had 6 days or 5 days of peace. We can't just have Israel now continue the bombing. especially in dense civilian sites as they have been. So I think there's an opportunity in the next 2-3 days to have the president, Secretary of State to call for this, and that's what members of Congress should be advocating for. Let me see. Why did you call for release of all? Do you support the unknown anomalous phenomena UAP disclosure amendment in the 2024 NDAA? Many experts believe inclusion of this amendment is critical to protecting national security. I do support that. It is the Schumer bill. It's to make sure that everyone in the country knows what the military knows about UAPs, unidentified objects, and I am actually getting a briefing on that tomorrow and participating in the call to make that public. I support the Schumer bill. My mobile home insurance just went up dramatically, and I live in a city. Many carriers have stopped covering locally, namely Foremost Insurance. What can you do to help? I am very, very sorry to hear that. This is the first that I am hearing about the insurance going up drastically for mobile home parks. I've been very active in Sunnyvale, as people know, in the Sunnyvale parks, of trying to get the costs down, of standing up to some of the mobile home park owners. If you please write to us and our staff, we'll make sure we look into your case and see if there's anything that we can do. What have you done to secure our southern border? Well, the Democrats want to secure our southern border. We want more border agents there. We want more people processing asylum claims. We want more people being able to process asylum without coming to the border, through the apps, through consulates. We want more border agents to be able to, immigration agents to be able to process these. The Republicans don't support it. We want to have work authorization so that people aren't coming and being in our cities without being able to work and provide for themselves. We want to make sure that they aren't congregating in the way they are, that there's a much more orderly process on asylum. But the Republicans have been unwilling to have anything serious about border security and an orderly process, and a process to citizenship, or to be able to work in this country legally without having to come through the smugglers and pay $10,000. So if they were serious about it, they would join some of our legislative efforts. Do you plan to establish a student advisory board for California 17? Student voices are so important. We have a lot of things coming up with students. We have a student town hall coming up. We have a student conference coming up. We did a student conference on mental well-being and mental health. We have another student town hall, and then we have a student conversation about the future of the American dream. So stay tuned, follow our website, follow our social media. A lot of student events coming up, and I love the student voices on climate, on gun violence. We did one on gun violence, on so many critical issues on student loans, and I had so many young people talk to me about their feelings on the killing of Palestinian children, and be out on the streets on some of those issues. So thank you for raising them. Can there be legislation to encourage remote work to help sustainability? We have too many conservative supervisors at public institutions who are forcing workers back in pay in person. I have written a whole book on this, Dignity in a Digital Age, and all about why we could have both in-person and remote work, and how remote work can actually create economic opportunities in places that don't have them. I'm all for a hybrid model. We do that in my congressional office. People come in when they have to come in, and some days they can work from home as well. I definitely think that that should be allowed and flexible, and you get the best if you have a balance, and it allows people also to spend time with their family. Can the wording for the public student loan forgiveness be changed to working for 10 years or 120 payments? Remove "and." This is a disadvantage. I have to work for 12 years to gain PSLF. That's a great point. That's actually a really good point. 10 years or 120 payments, not "and" 120 payments. Send us an email on that, Tom. Maybe you can follow up with this questioner, and we will look into it. Thank you for raising that. I always get great ideas from our district, and thank you for raising that. Thanks for calling out that aid to Israel has been used in violation of human rights and Leahy laws a member has. What are you doing to ensure these violations are stopped? What I have said is that any aid that goes out from the United States, whether to Israel, to Egypt, to any country, needs to comply with the Leahy law. And in HASC, I have said that the State Department needs to do a better job of enforcing the Leahy law. The law is there. The State Department doesn't often enforce it. We need it enforced, and I want to make sure that that enforcement provision is added to legislation so that all of our aid is consistent with the Leahy law. And the Leahy law, I'm told that senators actually were just discussing that today, that any future aid really has to be consistent with the Leahy law. Can the infrastructure package include replacement heat pumps? My fixed income parents were quoted $20,000 to replace their existing heat pumps. That is way out of whack, $20,000. It should be much less, as with the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act subsidizes the heat pumps and heat pump replacement. I'm surprised that they didn't get a better quote, but I will look into that, because that was exactly what the Inflation Reduction Act was supposed to do, is provide incentive for heat pumps, for heat pump replacement. Is any legislation in the works to prevent Trump's use of the Insurrection Act after the 2024 election? I was literally just talking about to this today with Zoe Lofgren, and she said that when Liz Cheney was in Congress, they tried, but they couldn't get Republicans. We can't get Republicans. That's the challenge. And the Republicans control the House. But I am concerned that there needs to be a look at the Insurrection Act so it can't be abused by future presidents. There needs to be a look at a bill that is still on the books from 2012 that allows the military to detain indefinitely American citizens who are engaged in terrorist conduct or unlawful conduct, as they define it. And I feel these are provisions that a future president could abuse. Not a normal president, but someone who wants to go after their enemies. And we really need to look at how we can tailor these so that it's not abused. Health insurance premiums are on the rise, while the care provided has both degraded in quality and availability. What is on the legislative agenda to address this issue? You're absolutely right. My health insurance premium went up too. I think from $750 to $850 a month. That's a lot of money. It's far than the rate of inflation. And what's needed is Medicare for all. What's needed is single payer, where we don't have this extraordinary for-profit healthcare system where the insurance companies are making out, the pharmacies are making out, some of the hospitals are making out on facility fees, the pharmacy benefit managers are making out, but the patients are stuck with huge costs and medical debt, high premiums, high deductibles, not knowing if their medicine is going to get pre-authorization or not, having to pay out of pocket. We need to change that system. We've been almost 20% of our GDP, 18% of our GDP on healthcare, $4 trillion, and we're not getting the care we deserve. We need single payer in this country. Will you consider supporting the establishment of the Department of Peace Building? I am for efforts to build peace. I mean, the reason I think that's the job of the Secretary of State, but I'm open to looking at other ways of doing that. Thanks for vocalizing the need to rebuild Gaza. What legislation are you writing to achieve this? Can you publicly affirm now you are against the annexation of any Palestinian lands? I've always been against the annexation of Palestinian lands. That would preclude a two-state solution, and I have vehemently opposed Netanyahu's plans to annex Palestinian lands or build any new settlements. And in terms of Gaza, I mean, that's why we had the conversation with the UNRWA Secretary General. We need to make sure that any aid package includes generous aid for the rebuilding of Gaza and humanitarian aid to Gaza and to UNRWA. And I would be absolutely committed to that. The Republicans want to take away Medicare and Social Security that we've entered. Are you working to stop it? You're absolutely right. We need to let people know. They're putting a debt commission together. The debt commission is not going to end tax breaks for the millionaires and billionaires. The debt commission is not going to cut defense. The debt commission is going to cut Social Security. It's going to cut Medicare. As it is, we need to increase Social Security. People can't live on the Social Security they're getting. It's with the cost of living. and the Republicans want to cut it. This is what is the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And we are doing everything we can. I'm for scrapping the cap on Social Security tax and then raising benefits for Social Security. They're for cutting Social Security benefits. It's a stark divide in what we would do. What can Congress do to mitigate any potential harm from AI? Are there prospects right now? So I have a whole proposal, op-ed coming out in the New York Times on this. I will send it to all of you. But look, we need to make sure that wealth disparity doesn't increase. Here's my concern, that AI, with OpenAI and Microsoft and Google and Facebook all doing it, they shouldn't be the beneficiaries while truck drivers are put out of work, while writers are put out of work, while human resource folks are put out of work, while sales reps are put out of work. This could increase the wealth disparity in America. And we have to really think through how AI is going to empower workers and not increase wealth disparity. The second thing is we need to make sure AI doesn't have bias in it. Third thing is we got to make sure AI doesn't do algorithms of false information, especially heading into the election, and amplify that in ways that really proliferate fast. And we need a safety check on AI. And these are the principles that we need our members of Congress advocating and doing something about. Private physicians are finding it very difficult to maintain independent practice groups, with Sutter consolidating practice and patients being left without doctors. What will be done? Well, we need to really stop private equity taking over these doctors' practices. You know what they're doing. There's a rule with health insurance that says that you can't do more than 15% for profits, and 85% has to be on patient care. So these private equities are going around health insurance and they're buying the physician groups, because then they are able to get around that 85%, and they can take more for profit by managing not just the health insurance but the providers. And so this is just a profit consolidation technique, and this is why we need single payer healthcare to avoid that kind of monetary gain. This is also why we need to enforce antitrust to make sure that we protect solo doctors against consolidation. What about SALT deduction? What is your position towards the 65,000 plus shareholders who were halted 35 days ago? No money, no shares, no answers. Will you support a subpoena of SEC to get the shares counted? The SALT deduction, with all the California delegations working to restore, and I'm on legislation on that. On the other issue, if you'd write to my office on it, I didn't get the details and want to be fully informed before I give an answer. What do you think needs to be done to address climate change? Great question. The first thing that needs to be done is we need to stop the permitting of new fossil fuel infrastructure in the state of California, and we need to stop approving things like Willow Project and these huge, massive new fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to stop the fossil fuel subsidies that we're giving. We need massive continued investment in solar and wind and geothermal, in new forms of energy and electric vehicles. We need to build our electric infrastructure. We need much more public transportation. And we need a reindustrialization of this country with clean steel, clean aluminum, new industries that lower the carbon footprint. Is there anything Biden or Congress can do to continue the pause on student loans or cancel them? I think the president should have been bold and just zeroed them out and then force the people to take them to court to try to sue the American people to get that money back. But under the Higher Education Authority Act, the president's looking at options of how he can forgive some of the payments for some of the students. And we in the Progressive Caucus are pushing that he's got to forgive this. I mean, $40,000 on average of student debt. It's crazy what we make people do in this country. The Supreme Court has shown that it can't hold itself accountable and needs an enforceable code of ethics. What action can Congress take to hold justice accountable? We need to hold the Supreme Court to the same standards that members of Congress have, at least, and that's not very high. I mean, you have to disclose if you get a gift. Right now, they don't have to do that. You have to enforce the gift rules, that they shouldn't be able to get a gift for more than $50. We need to have transparency, and Congress should pass it. I mean, they may strike it down, but Congress should pass a Supreme Court ethics And I have called for Supreme Court term limits, 18 years, and you're out. You can't be on the Supreme Court more than 18 years. You could be another judge. You could be a judge for life, not a Supreme Court justice for life. Thanks for calling out bloated military spending. I was the lone vote, by the way, on that in the House Armed Services Committee, 56-1. I'm the only guy who stood up against the $1 trillion defense budget. What legislation will you be applying to reduce the billions of taxpayer military aid to Israel? What I support, first of all, the military budget in context is foreign aid in general is less than 1% of the military budget. Most of the military budget is going to American defense contractors, about half of it. And the problem with the military budget is that the money is not going fully to our national security. It's being manipulated by defense contractors who are overcharging. And we're headed towards a $1 trillion defense budget. In terms of all our foreign aid and military aid, it must be consistent with the Leahy law. I have said that. But the issue of defense spending is an issue of defense contractors making extraordinary profits. Google bought land in San Jose for development that isn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, San Jose residents are being priced out of their homes. What is being done to address the housing issues? We need to talk. I will talk to Mayor Matt Mahan. My understanding is Google had made a commitment to development for affordable housing there. That needs to be upheld. And I am for building more affordable housing, more housing that's mixed income for social housing, so that we can reduce prices and not just have the continued gentrification of this area. Let me just look through some of the comments to make sure that we're getting a lot of them. What is the latest in your efforts to phase out leaded aviation fuel and stop the pollution near Reed Hillview? Thank you for asking that. Zolofman and I have managed to make sure that leaded aviation fuel is not being used at Reed View, and we're working on that airport to close down. It was appalling to see the blood levels of kids in that area because of leaded fuel. And we need a ban on leaded fuel for aviation nationwide, and that's what we're working on. Can you lead an investigation to the impact by military spending on climate change? The U.S. is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. I have called in the armed services for the military to lead the way on reducing carbon footprint. They understand the military risks, the national security risks. I think that the Army, Navy, and Air Force are all committed to about 50% CO2 reductions, but we need to continue to hold them accountable, push them to be innovative in this area. I was very helpful when I heard about your bill to fix Congress and stop corruption in politics. That was one of my most popular viral videos, actually. I was very surprised how much a nerve it struck. I called for making sure that we have no members of Congress could become lobbyists, no stock trading, making sure that there were term limits for members of Congress, term limits for Supreme Court justices, no PAC money, no lobbyist money. I just said I'm for term limits for members of Congress and Supreme Court justices. And I'm hoping to get some bipartisan support. We'll be introducing it end of this month. Let's get to the next question. Many families in Silicon Valley are struggling to put food on the table. What can be done to protect food assistance programs and lower food costs? We need to increase SNAP benefits. We can't have SNAP benefits be conditional as the Republicans want to do. We need our tech companies, our private sector, or all of us to step up in the community, and I know many have. And I really applaud the work of Centerville Community Service Center, all the food banks in the area, and I'm very grateful for their work. Second Harvest, where I just volunteered. The public transportation in Santa Clara County makes it impossible to get to school or a job efficiently. Can you fix anything? Please take a look at my video. I went from Fremont to Cupertino on public transport. I'm trying to remember what all we did. We went from BART from Fremont to Milpitas. Then I think from Milpitas, we went on a light rail, then took a bus. It took 2 hours to get from Fremont to Cupertino, a little over 2 hours. I mean, that's crazy. We've got to have far more efficient public transportation in this county. I mean, look, the people are well-meaning on these public transportation, but it's got to be safe. It was affordable, but it can't take 2.5 hours. And I'm going to be convening a meeting with all of the key people, VTA, BART, Caltrain, and saying, how can we reduce these times? How can we be better at our routes? And how can we get the resources? Because otherwise, who's going to take public transportation across my district if it takes 2.5 hours? Any movement on college debt forgiveness or free? And by the way, please see the video if you haven't on it. Because I'm not just talking about it theoretically. I actually got on to all of the different public transportations, the light rail, Caltrain, bus, BART, to see what it actually is like. And that 2 hours isn't even counting the wait time in between. Any movement on college debt forgiveness or free college increasing funding. I am for free public college. It would cost about $80 billion a year. It's something we need to do. We should do. We shouldn't have the college costs at what it is. And I am for student loan forgiveness. It's important to give the president credit. He has done a lot on it. It's the Supreme Court. It's the Supreme Court that struck him down every step of the way. Insurance has been going up for Californians due to climate change and all the destruction it's wrought. This is a great point. Climate change is going to cost us trillions of dollars if we don't do something about it. Trillions of dollars of disaster, of healthcare costs, of higher insurance costs. And this is why we need to make the investment today to transition. Why is housing so expensive? We need more houses up here. We absolutely need more houses. Build more affordable housing. People on city council, please support more affordable housing. Federal government needs to support more affordable housing, more social housing, more public housing that we're building to lower the costs. And that is something I am absolutely championing. With the Republicans controlling the House, I'm worried any progress in climate will be stalled. Is there any hope for getting something done on climate change? We're trying to play defense. We've got the Inflation Reduction Act. It's huge, huge boon for solar, huge boon for wind, huge boon for electric vehicles, huge boon for batteries. But we've got to, we've got to just now build on that, but not right now. It's defense because the House Republicans aren't going to do anything on climate. Prescription, Ro, can you acknowledge all the questions on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and say something simple? Yes, absolutely. We've had atrocious anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in this country. Let me talk about both. I mean, just yesterday, of course, in Vermont, 3 Palestinians shot at because they were Arab. At least that's from all the news reporting. The 6-year-old boy who was murdered because he was Palestinian American. That has no place in America. We have to understand the hate that's being directed against Arab Americans, against Palestinian Americans, against Muslim Americans, and stand out loudly and condemn it unequivocally and be very, very clear that Islamophobia has no place in America. And the anti-Semitism has been awful to watch. I made a statement. I don't agree always with the politics, but to have the president of Apex home, to have people go to the person's home and have smoke bombs, and to have blood coming out, red blood in threatening violence, that has no place in America. No place in America, and no place to have these kind of threats where Jewish Americans are telling me that they're afraid to get into cabs and are using different names because they don't want to tell people that they're Jewish. And in college campuses, some people, just because they're Jewish, are being singled out and said, oh, they're colonizers. I mean, they may have nothing to do if they're Jewish American with something that's going on in Israel. It would be like holding me responsible for what's going on in India if I've never been to India. I mean, you can hold me responsible perhaps because I'm in Congress, but you can't just hold someone who's Indian American responsible for something that's happening just because of their heritage or their religion. We have to recognize anti-Semitism is a real problem. And some of the things I've seen on social media where people are denying the Holocaust or not knowledgeable of the Holocaust or quoting Osama bin Laden's letter. I said to someone, it's not just un-American, it's stupid. Like, are these people not educated? We need to have proper education in this country about history, about 9/11, about the Holocaust, about World War I, World War II. Just because you're on social media doesn't mean that you're knowledgeable or saying something smart. And I think there have to be some basic standards in this country. Prescriptions and getting medical care is the is so expensive now. See, I'm personally struggling to pay my bills, and I know it's the same for many others. Are there any proposals to bring down medical costs? Absolutely, on bringing down medical costs. Let me just say, I've seen some of the comments on history. Yeah, I am all for teaching history properly. And I saw some people have been mentioning Nakba of 1948 and teach about the Balfour Resolution, teach about the creation of Israel, teach about the Holocaust, then have a point of view. But what we have right now is a lot of young people, I'm just being blunt, who don't have a knowledge of the history, and they're spewing things based on social media, often engaged in anti-Semitism or Islamophobia without the facts, without the knowledge, without the history. And that's not going to create a world that is going to be at peace or a strong democracy. And I have no problem pushing back at sometimes the young people. I love young people. I love what they're doing in climate. I love what they're doing in gun violence. I love what they're doing in many ways. They're a very active generation. But we owe it to them to teach them properly the complexity of history and to teach them that just having an opinion isn't good enough. It needs to be an informed opinion, and that there's a difference between things that Donald Trump spouts and things that are said that have fact basis. And it's just not all opinions or all things that go viral are equal. We need more transportation. I want to answer the medical question. Absolutely. We need to lower those medical costs. That comes up again and again. Bernie Sanders and I have a bill to get rid of medical debt in this country. We need to do more to cap the price of drugs like insulin, not just for people on Medicare, but more broadly. We need Medicare to negotiate. We need no deductibles, no premiums with single payer, and we've got to work towards doing that. We need more public transportation to high schools. I agree with that. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Some folks know I always rode a school bus, and it's very hard now in parts of our district to do that. So I'm for making that investment, and they can be green buses. So that's one way of getting less emissions on the road. What about the stonewalling of military appointments? I don't understand it. I don't understand how the Republican Party, the party of national security, has allowed Tommy Tuberville to do that. It is really shameful, disgraceful that he is holding up our military appointments, holding it up for purely political reasons. And there used to be a time in this country where you disagreed. You disagreed on tax policy. You disagreed on, I want to help people who have food insecurity. Some of the Republicans want cuts. Fine, that's a democracy. But you now have people who are obstructing the functioning of our government, obstructing us having people in positions of national security, obstructing the Constitution, taking away, thinking that they can do things to question elections. There should be a bipartisan movement in America to preserve our democracy, to stand up for our basic values, and to really understand the stakes of what we're facing these days with people who want to undermine some of our fundamental values. I appreciate very much our district. I appreciate this town hall, as we've had supporters of both Israel and supporters of Palestine engaged civilly, and we'll do it in person. We've had very, very civil discussions in person in this district, and I want to hope that tradition continues. As I often say, if we can't in America figure out how we have civil conversation without the Islamophobia, without the anti-Semitism about the Middle East, then what hope is there for the Middle East? We need to have in this country a model for finding solutions for peace, for coming together. And our district represents people from around the world. It represents people who trace their heritage back, like I do, to the Indian freedom movement and the fight for India's independence with Gandhi, to people who have overcome slavery and Jim Crow, to people who trace their heritage to Cesar Chavez and the fight for dignity and justice for farm workers, to folks who have family who escaped the Holocaust, to folks who experienced, as Palestinians did, displacement in 1948 and the loss of their land and the loss of their homes. We have all of that in our district. And what we need to do is respect each other. What we need to do is respect each other's stories, understand and empathize with where each of us are coming from, and look for some common understanding a common humanity that brings this country together and has some leadership to try to bring the world together at a very dark moment. I'm very proud to represent this district. I really appreciate your engaging tonight, and I look forward to seeing everyone back home in December and having an in-person town hall in January. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.